Sir, I need to see your papers, identification and proof of status, right now.
Papers? I just finished leading service. What exactly are you asking for?
Don't play games with me. You were flagged. I need to know if you're legally in this country.
I'm an American citizen. I've done nothing wrong.
Everyone says that. Show me your documents or this gets difficult.
You're demanding papers from me? In a church parking lot?
Grace Community Church's parking lot was peaceful when it happened. Sunday afternoon, 1:17 p.m. The kind of spring day where the Arizona sun was warm, but not brutal, where families lingered after service sharing fellowship, where the stone facade church cast long shadows across asphalt, still holding the morning's heat. Lieutenant Garrison Phelan had just finished delivering the benediction, his Sunday routine for the past 12 years, serving as both a Metro PD lieutenant and an active-duty U.S. military chaplain. Still in his clerical attire, black clergy shirt with white collar, dark slacks, his Bible in hand, his chaplain's cross visible on a chain around his neck. He was walking toward his car when 3 ICE agents emerged from a dark government SUV parked near the church entrance. I'm moving with tactical aggression toward him across the parking lot, where parishioners still chatted in small groups. Their body cameras were rolling, recording what would become the most expensive Sunday service in the state's history. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight, and if you haven't already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, because trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Agent Miller Stallard led the approach, his partners, Agents Pendergast and Whitaker, flanking wide like they were corralling a suspect trying to flee. Phelan saw them coming, read the tactical spacing, the hands hovering near duty belts, the body language of men who'd already decided he was a problem. And his cop brain, sharpened through 22 years of police work and countless high-tension encounters, cataloged it all in the second it took them to close the distance. His chaplain's heart, trained to seek peace and assume good faith, wanted to believe this was a misunderstanding. Federal agents, immigration and customs enforcement patches visible on their tactical vests, looking at him like he was prey instead of a man of God who'd just finished leading worship, looking at the Bible in his hand and the clergy collar around his neck, and seeing someone whose papers needed checking instead of a lieutenant and military chaplain serving his community and his country. He knew where this was going before Stallard opened his mouth. He'd heard the stories from parishioners, had counseled families torn apart by aggressive enforcement, and had prayed with people traumatized by agents who saw skin color before seeing humanity. He just never imagined it would happen to him. Not in his church parking lot. Not after Sunday service. Not when he was holding a Bible and wearing the collar that marked him as a shepherd to his flock. Sir, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We're conducting verification operations. We need to see identification and documentation. Phelan's hands stayed visible, one holding his worn Bible, the other at his side, despite every instinct that told him to reach for his credentials and explain. 22 years of police experience had taught him that sudden movements around armed agents could turn deadly. His chaplain's training added another layer. De-escalate, seek peace, assume best intentions even when facing worst behaviors. Around them, the church parking lot was still full of congregants, families loading into cars, elderly members chatting near the entrance, youth group kids playing by the fellowship hall. And near the sanctuary doors, a longtime member named Anselm Sterling, a retired teacher who'd recently started filming local events for the church's archive, had his phone out, documenting what appeared to be an unusual confrontation in a place that was supposed to be sanctuary. The most expensive Sunday service in state history was about to cost the federal government $4.9 million. And it hadn't even occurred to Agent Miller Stallard that the man in the clergy collar holding a Bible might actually be exactly who he appeared to be, a lieutenant and military chaplain who'd devoted his life to serving God, country, and community. He'd now being treated like a criminal on the church grounds he'd shepherded for over a decade. Officers, I'm Lieutenant Garrison Phelan, Metro Police Department. I'm also Captain Phelan, U.S. Army National Guard Chaplain Corps. I just finished leading Sunday service. Is there something I can help you with? Stallard's expression didn't soften. Everyone claims to be someone important when we stop them. We need to see documentation proving your legal status in this country. Phelan looked at the Bible in his hand, at the cross around his neck, at the church behind them where he'd just blessed his congregation. Then he looked at the 3 agents who'd decided none of that mattered. My credentials are in my vehicle. But first, I need you to articulate reasonable suspicion for this stop. We're on church property. See, I'm a pastor and a police officer. What specific facts led you to approach me?" The question hung in the spring air, unanswered, as his congregation watched their shepherd being treated like a stranger in his own house of worship. Grace Community Church, on Sunday mornings, was a sanctuary in every sense of the word. The stone facade building sat on 3 acres of carefully maintained grounds, desert landscaping that required minimal water but maximum care, a playground where children laughed between services, a parking lot that filled every week with families seeking fellowship and faith. Sunday afternoon at 1:17 p.m. was that peaceful window between services ending and the property emptying, when congregants lingered in the Arizona spring sunshine sharing meals, making plans, letting children burn off energy before the drive home. So the kind of moment that defined community, that made the work of ministry worthwhile. Lieutenant Garrison Phelan stood near the sanctuary entrance, his worn leather Bible still in hand, greeting the last few families as they departed. He'd delivered the benediction 20 minutes ago. "May the Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you and be gracious to you." The same blessing he'd spoken over this congregation for 12 years. He was dressed in his Sunday uniform, black clergy shirt with white collar, dark slacks, comfortable shoes for standing through 2 services. His chaplain's cross hung on a silver chain around his neck, not ostentatious, just visible enough to identify his calling. His police credentials were in his car, his military ID in his wallet. Yet his dual lives as Metro PD lieutenant and Army National Guard chaplain intersecting every Sunday when he served this community. Across the parking lot, the youth group was organizing a basketball game. Near the fellowship hall, the women's ministry was planning next month's outreach. By the playground, parents supervised children on swings and slides. Normal, peaceful, everything a Sunday afternoon should be. Then the dark Chevrolet Suburban pulled into the church driveway, moving past the welcome sign and the visitor parking with deliberate purpose. Government plates, tinted windows, the configuration that meant federal law enforcement. Phelan's cop brain registered it immediately. ICE vehicle, tactical setup, 3 occupants visible through the windshield. His chaplain's heart wanted to assume they were here for legitimate reasons. Maybe checking on a tip about someone in the congregation, maybe seeking cooperation on an investigation. But the way they parked, blocking the main exit, positioning for tactical advantage, suggested something else. The doors opened. 3 men in tactical vests emerged, ice patches visible moving with aggressive purpose across the church parking lot. Not toward the office, not toward any specific parishioner. Toward him, toward the man in the clergy collar holding a Bible, treating a pastor on church grounds like a suspect requiring detention. Around them, conversations stopped. Parents pulled children closer. Anselm Sterling, standing near the sanctuary with his phone, started recording, some instinct telling him to document whatever was about to happen. The most expensive Sunday service in state history had just begun. Phelan's hands stayed visible, one holding his Bible, the other at his side, despite every instinct that wanted to reach for credentials and resolve this quickly. 22 years of police work had taught him to read tactical formations, to recognize when officers had already decided you were dangerous, to understand that compliance meant survival, even when you'd done nothing wrong. Agent Stallard held center position, approaching across the parking lot with his partners spreading wide. Pendergast moved left toward the fellowship hall, cutting off that direction. Whitaker shifted right toward the playground, blocking that escape route, a perfect tactical triangle that controlled the space and eliminated options. Phelan had used this exact formation hundreds of times during his police career. High-risk warrant services, your armed suspect apprehensions, situations where you positioned your team in a triangle because it provided overlapping coverage and prevented the subject from fleeing or fighting. They were using it on a chaplain in a church parking lot in front of his congregation while he held a Bible. His cop brain cataloged every detail. 3 agents, tactical vests suggesting body armor, duty belts with weapons visible, body cameras recording. Not random, planned. They'd identified a target and were executing an apprehension. His chaplain's heart struggled to reconcile what he was seeing with what he knew about grace, about assuming best intentions, about seeking peace. But 22 years of law enforcement experience couldn't be overridden by theological training. All he knew what he was witnessing, federal agents treating a man of God like a criminal. "Sir, step away from the building," Keep your hands where we can see them. Stallard's voice carried that bureaucratic authority that expected immediate compliance. Phelan stayed calm, his pastor's training taking over. Officers, I'm Lieutenant Garrison Phelan, Metro Police Department. I'm also Captain Phelan, U.S. Army National Guard, Chaplain Corps. I'm the pastor of this church. Is there something I can help you with? We're conducting immigration enforcement operations. We need to see identification and documentation. My credentials are in my vehicle. But first, I need to understand why you're approaching me. This is private church property. I'm clearly a member of the clergy. What reasonable suspicion justifies this stop? The tactical spacing tightened. Pendergast moved closer from the left. Whitaker adjusted his angle from the right. They were herding him, controlling his movement, treating pastoral presence as suspicious behavior. Around them, the parking lot had gone quiet. Youth group kids had stopped playing. Parents watched with growing concern. Elderly members clustered near the entrance, confusion evident on their faces. Anselm Sterling was recording everything, his retired teacher's instinct recognizing something wrong. Phelan looked at each agent, making sure their body cameras captured his calm demeanor, his clergy attire, his Bible. Then he looked directly at Stallard's camera. I'm Lieutenant Garrison Phelan, Metro PD. I'm Captain Phelan, Army Chaplain Corps. And I'm being approached by federal agents on church property without apparent reasonable suspicion. I want this documented. Stallard's expression hardened. Sir, you're being detained for verification. Cooperate or face obstruction charges. My wallet is in my car, Phelan said calmly, his chaplain's training keeping his voice level despite rising concern. I'm going to retrieve it. My police credentials and military ID are there, along with my driver's license. He started toward his vehicle parked near the sanctuary, but Stallard blocked his path. Don't move toward any vehicle. Stay where you are. You asked for identification. I'm telling you where it is. My car is 30 feet away. We'll verify your identity after we secure the situation. Phelan pulled his personal phone from his pocket slowly, movements deliberate. Then, I'll call my precinct. They'll confirm I'm Lieutenant Phelan. I'll call the base chaplain's office. They'll confirm my military status. Pendergast moved in from the left. Put the phone down. No calls until we complete verification. The trap was perfect. They demanded identification. He told them where it was. They forbade him from retrieving it or verifying through other means. They were manufacturing non-compliance. Officers, I'm standing on church property, in clergy attire, holding a Bible after Sunday service. I've identified myself as a police lieutenant and military chaplain. I've offered multiple ways to verify that information. What's the legal basis for detaining me? We have reports of suspicious individuals at religious facilities. Suspicious how? I'm the pastor. This is my congregation. What appears suspicious about a chaplain at his own church? Stallard's eyes narrowed. You fit the description of individuals we're seeking. What description? A black man in a clergy collar? Silence, because that was exactly the description. Around them, parishioners were moving closer, their shepherd under threat. An elderly deacon, Brother Marcus, 72 years old, had fought in Vietnam, stepped forward with righteous anger. That's Chaplain Phelan. He's been our pastor for 12 years. He's Metro PD. What are you doing? Sir, step back. I won't step back. This is our church. That's our pastor. You're on private property, harassing a man of God. More voices joined. He's a police officer. He's a chaplain. This is wrong. Why are you doing this? Phelan raised his hand, calming his congregation with pastoral authority. Brothers and sisters, please, let me handle this. He turned back to Stallard, his cop brain building the case even as his chaplain's heart grieved the violation. I'm Lieutenant Garrison Phelan. I was born at Travis Air Force Base 51 years ago. Military family, served this country my entire life. I don't need naturalization papers. I need you to verify the credentials I've offered. We'll verify downtown. No, you'll verify here, on church property, or you'll articulate probable cause for arrest. Because right now, you're violating the sanctity of this church and my constitutional rights. If this moment is stirring something in you, stay with us. Subscribe so you don't miss how this story unfolds. See, Agent Stallard. Phelan's voice carried across the parking lot with pastoral authority honed through years of leading worship and delivering sermons. I'm going to explain this once for your body cameras and these witnesses. The Fourth Amendment protects all persons from unreasonable searches and seizures. That protection extends to church property. You're conducting enforcement operations on private religious grounds without a warrant, without my consent as the property's pastor, and without reasonable suspicion. Stallard stepped closer, attempting intimidation. On church property, in front of a congregation. Sir, final warning. Furthermore, Phelan continued, his cop of brain overriding his chaplain's inclination toward grace, under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, government intrusion on religious property requires compelling interest and least restrictive means. You've articulated no compelling interest. You're using maximum restriction on a Sunday afternoon in front of worshipers. The parking lot had transformed into an outdoor courtroom, with Phelan delivering what amounted to constitutional arguments for the violation of sanctuary. His congregation clustered closer, not threatening, but protective of their shepherd. Anselm Sterling's phone captured everything from multiple angles as he moved for better shots. I'm invoking my Fourth Amendment rights. I do not consent to detention on church property. I do not consent to any search. I am clearly stating for these cameras and witnesses that I'm a U.S. citizen, a police lieutenant, a military chaplain, and I'm being illegally detained at my own church after Sunday service. Whitaker moved in from the right, handcuffs visible. You're being detained for investigation. Continued resistance will result in arrest. I'm not resisting. I'm asserting constitutional rights on private church property. Every law enforcement officer in this country knows the difference. You're deliberately conflating them because you've profiled a black pastor, and now you're too committed to admit the mistake. Pendergast grabbed Phelan's left arm. Phelan didn't fight. Violence on church grounds would dishonor everything he believed. But he didn't assist either. His body went limp, forcing the agent to support his weight. For the record, Phelan's voice remained steady, his chaplain's calm merging with his cop's precision. It's 1:23 p.m. on Sunday, April 14th. I'm being physically restrained on church property at Grace Community Church. I have not threatened anyone. I have not attempted to flee. I have not committed any crime. I identified myself as a lieutenant and chaplain. I offered verification. I'm being arrested because 3 federal agents decided a black man at a church must be illegal. Brother Marcus's voice rang out. This is wrong. This is a house of God. You're violating sanctuary. His military training evident in his command presence despite his age. Sister Patricia, the church secretary for 20 years, added her voice. Chaplain Phelan has served this community for 12 years. Call Metro PD. They'll tell you who he is. But Pendergast already had the handcuffs out, and Phelan knew, from his cop brain, from his chaplain's heart, to from his lived experience as a black man in America, that his credentials, his collar, his Bible, none of it would protect him from agents who'd already decided who he was. The handcuffs closed around Phelan's wrists, still holding his Bible even as the steel bit into his skin. The symbolism wasn't lost on him. A man of God, literally clutching scripture, being shackled on church grounds by federal agents. I'm not resisting, Phelan announced, his voice carrying pastoral authority even in chains. I'm submitting to unlawful detention. Every action from this point is being documented for the civil rights lawsuit I will file. Pendergast grabbed his right arm, Whitaker his left. They tried to walk him toward their SUV, but Phelan let his body go completely limp. Dead weight, passive resistance, said the technique he'd seen in civil rights footage and never imagined using in his clergy collar. Walk! No! I'm being unlawfully arrested on church property. I won't assist in violating this sanctuary. They dragged him across the parking lot, past the playground where children had played an hour ago, past the fellowship hall where his congregation shared meals, past the sanctuary where he'd just blessed them. His Bible slipped from his bound hands, falling to the asphalt. Sister Patricia rushed to retrieve it, clutching it to her chest as tears streamed down her face. I'm being dragged across church grounds at 1:25 p.m., Phelan narrated, his cop brain documenting even as his chaplain's heart broke. My shoulder is being wrenched. The handcuffs are cutting circulation. I'd excessive force applied to a pastor who offered no physical resistance. His congregation followed, not threatening, but bearing witness. Brother Marcus recording on his phone. The youth group kids crying, confused why their chaplain was being arrested. Families who'd come for peace finding violence instead. They reached the SUV. Stallard opened the rear door. Prisoner transport configuration, steel mesh partition. "Watch your head," he said without caring, shoving Phelan inside. Phelan couldn't catch himself. Hit the seat hard, his head striking the mesh. Blood trickled from a cut above his eye. He could feel it, warm against his skin. He looked through the partition at his congregation, his flock, watching their shepherd being taken. "It's 1:27 p.m. I'm Lieutenant Garrison Phelan. Metro PD badge 5872. Captain Phelan, U.S. Our Army Chaplain Corps. I'm being unlawfully arrested at Grace Community Church. I want every badge number, every name, every second of footage preserved." The door slammed. Through the tinted windows, he saw Anselm Sterling still recording, saw his congregation gathering, saw the church where he'd served faithfully for 12 years, all of it fading as the SUV pulled away. In his cop brain, he catalogued evidence. In his chaplain's heart, he prayed, "Father, forgive them, but also hold them accountable." Chapter 6. The federal detention facility holding cell was 10 feet by 10 feet of concrete and fluorescent light. Nothing like the sanctuary where Phelan spent his Sundays, everything like the cages where he'd visited inmates during his chaplain duties. They'd taken his clergy collar, his cross, his belt, or everything that marked him as a man of God, stripped away and catalogued as personal effects in some evidence locker. But they couldn't take his faith. Phelan sat on the metal bench, eyes closed, hands folded despite the red marks from the handcuffs, not in despair, in prayer. "Father, I lift up Agents Stallard, Pendergast, and Whitaker. They know not what they do. Forgive them their trespasses. But Lord, also let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." His chaplain's training had prepared him for this in ways his police training hadn't. How to find peace in confinement. How to maintain dignity when it was being stripped away. How to pray for those who persecuted you, while also documenting their sins for earthly accountability. Except because Phelan understood something his captors didn't. Grace and justice weren't opposites. They were partners. He could forgive while also ensuring consequences. He could pray for their souls while meticulously recording their legal violations. Count 1. Fourth Amendment violation. Unlawful detention on private church property without reasonable suspicion. Count 2. Religious Freedom Restoration Act violation. Government intrusion on religious grounds without compelling interest. Count 3. Excessive force. Physical restraint of a non-resistant clergy member. Count 4. Violation of First Amendment free exercise rights. Interference with religious practice on church property. His cop brain and chaplain's heart worked in harmony now, building both a legal case and a spiritual reckoning. 3 hours passed. He counted by prayer cycles, marking time with scripture memorization instead of clock watching. Psalm 94. O Lord, God of vengeance, shine forth. Rise up, O Judge of the earth. Repay to the proud what they deserve. But also Matthew 5. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Grace and justice. Forgiveness and accountability. Both necessary, neither sufficient alone. When the door finally opened, Supervisor Brookscroft's face showing panic, Phelan was ready. Not with rage, but with righteous clarity about what came next. "Chaplain Phelan!" "Lieutenant Phelan. Captain Phelan. Get my titles correct. I've earned them through service to community and country." Croft flinched. "There's been a terrible mistake." "No. And there's been a constitutional violation on church property. Mistakes are accidents. This was deliberate profiling of a black pastor. We'll make this right." "You can't make this right. You can preserve evidence, face consequences, and pray I show more grace than you showed my congregation." Brookscroft had supervised ICE operations for 14 years, long enough to recognize catastrophic errors. The call from Metro PD's chief at 4:47 p.m., 3 hours after the church parking lot detention, had triggered every warning in his system. "Brooks, where is Lieutenant Garrison Phelan? His congregation says he was arrested at church. We have viral video of agents handcuffing a pastor. And the Army Chaplain Corps is asking why one of their captains is missing." "Lieutenant? Chaplain? We have..." "You have a 22-year police veteran and active-duty military chaplain in custody, arrested at his own church. After Sunday service, in front of his congregation. Fix this. Now. Croft had reviewed the detention file with growing horror. Clergy attire ignored. Bible dismissed. Offers of verification refused. Church sanctuary violated. Now he stood in the holding cell doorway, looking at a man who'd spent 3 hours in detention and emerged with the kind of controlled fury that could end careers, but tempered with grace that made the fury more devastating. Chaplain Phelan, I sincerely apologize for this misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Supervisor. It's profiling. Your agents saw a black man at a church and assumed criminality despite clergy attire clearly identifying me as a pastor. There were procedural errors. Procedural errors? Your agents violated church sanctuary. They arrested a military chaplain in front of his congregation. They refused verification despite my offering police and military contacts. That's not procedural. That's systematic violation of religious and civil rights. Croft pulled out a release document. If you'll sign this acknowledging mutual misunderstanding. Phelan's response was quiet but absolute. I'm a police officer. I know what that document does. And as a chaplain, I believe in grace. But grace without accountability isn't grace. It's enabling. I won't sign. Chaplain, we can resolve this. I want documentation. Every moment of my detention preserved. Every agent's name and badge number. Every frame of body camera footage showing you violating church sanctuary. The witness videos my congregation recorded. All of it preserved as evidence. That seems. I'm filing a federal lawsuit. I'm requesting an Inspector General investigation. I'm filing complaints with Metro PD about interagency coordination failures. I'm notifying the Army Chaplain Corps that one of their officers was detained while performing religious duties. This isn't negotiable. Phelan stood, his absence of collar and cross somehow making him more pastoral, not less. You violated a church, Supervisor? A place of sanctuary? A holy space? That requires accountability, not apology. Croft felt his career dissolving. We'll cooperate fully. You'll preserve evidence for attorney Tessa Bramwell. Civil rights litigation. So she's going to expose the systematic failures that let this happen. And I'm going to make sure every congregation, every chaplain, every person of faith knows that even church grounds don't protect you from profiling. He walked past Croft, head high despite 3 hours of detention. Oh, and Supervisor? I'll pray for your souls, but I'll also pursue justice for my congregation. Grace and accountability aren't opposites. They're partners. The trial began 16 months later in federal district court. Attorney Tessa Bramwell, a fierce civil rights specialist, stood before the jury and delivered an opening that combined legal precision with moral clarity. Lieutenant Garrison Phelan finished Sunday service. He's a 22-year police veteran. He's a U.S. military chaplain. And 3 ICE agents decided he looked suspicious. Not because he'd committed a crime, but because they saw a black man at a church and assumed he didn't belong there, despite the clergy collar, despite the Bible, despite everything identifying him as the pastor. The monitors showed body camera footage, Phelan in full clergy attire, the Bible in his hand, the church in the background. Then the agent's aggressive approach, the dismissal of his credentials, the violation of sanctuary. These could be fake. Stallard's voice on the recording, talking about a clergy collar and a Bible on church property. 6 jurors took notes. Others watched with visible disgust. The civilian footage followed. Anselm Sterling's recording capturing the congregation's horror. The children crying, the elderly deacon shouting about violating God's house, and the image of a pastor being dragged across church grounds while his flock watched helplessly. 4 jurors were crying. The defense tried damage control. Protocols, suspicious behavior, brief detention, no actual harm. Then Bramwell called Supervisor Croft to the stand. Supervisor, your agents testified they followed protocol. What protocol allows arresting pastors on church property? The agents believed what? That a man in a clergy collar holding a Bible after Sunday service was suspicious? They were conducting verification. He offered verification. He gave them his precinct number, his military chaplain's office. They refused to call. Why? Silence. The truth, Supervisor, is your agents saw a black pastor and decided he was illegal. Then they violated church sanctuary, arrested a military chaplain, to traumatize a congregation. Isn't that what really happened? The agents acted in good faith. Good faith? They handcuffed a man of God on holy ground. That's not good faith. That's profiling with badges. Deliberation. 11 hours. Verdict. Unanimous. Constitutional violations, religious freedom violations, excessive force, violation of sanctuary. Damages, $4.9 million. The courtroom erupted. Phelan sat quietly, thinking of his congregation who'd witnessed his arrest, praying the settlement would help others avoid the same trauma. The settlement arrived 15 weeks later. $4.9 million, after legal fees, enough to transform ministry. Phelan returned to Grace Community Church the next Sunday, back in his clergy collar, back in the pulpit. His congregation gave him a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. Agents Stallard, to Pendergast, and Whitaker were reassigned to desk positions. Supervisor Croft took early retirement. The Department of Homeland Security announced reforms. No operations on religious property without supervisor approval. Mandatory credential verification. Religious freedom training. But Phelan knew policy changes weren't enough. He created the Grace and Justice Legal Clinic with $4 million of his settlement. The nonprofit provided free legal representation to those targeted by profiling. It trained communities on constitutional rights. It brought lawsuits, relentlessly. First year, 512 clients represented, 387 cases won, $6.2 million in additional settlements. Lieutenant Garrison Phelan stayed at Metro PD and in the Chaplain Corps, but changed how he served. Every Sunday, he remembered the handcuffs and 3 hours stolen for pastoring while black. 7 years later, Chaplain Phelan was promoted to colonel, overseeing chaplains across 3 states. His arrest had become case law on religious freedom and racial profiling. On each anniversary, Grace Community held a Sanctuary Sunday, civil rights education, legal clinics, community healing. The parking lot where it happened had a memorial stone. On this ground, Chaplain Phelan defended faith and freedom. His courage changed enforcement policy. Phelan's favorite Bible verse, Micah 6:8, guided his work. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly. Justice for the violation. Mercy for the violators. Humility in pursuing both. He'd shown grace by praying for the agents. He'd pursued justice by holding them accountable. And in doing both, he'd proven that faith and constitutional rights weren't opposites. They were partners in protecting human dignity. The $4.9 million hadn't made him rich. It had made his ministry more effective, his advocacy more powerful, his witness more complete. Because Chaplain Garrison Phelan had learned that sometimes the most faithful act is demanding accountability. That grace without justice isn't grace. It's enabling. That loving your enemies includes ensuring they face consequences so they can't hurt others. His congregation understood. His clients understood. And slowly, the system was learning too. One lawsuit, one protected worshiper, one defended sanctuary at a time.